If you're a 90s kid, you probably watched a little game show on Nickelodeon called Legends of the Hidden Temple. If you didn't, just imagine a bunch of exhausted, terrified kids and preteens in teams of two, battling against each other in trivia and physical challenges until one team of two kids is left. Then, they're forced to enter what is essentially an old Mesoamerican temple to seek out that day's relic for a chance at glorious prizes, which at the time was usually vacations to Universal Studios, boomboxes, CD players, VCRs, shoes, and inline skates. You know, the stuff that 90s kids wanted for spending an entire day dancing around like a circus monkey for the enjoyment of thousands of other kids across the country. If you've watched or imagined this sort of thing, you're probably thinking, man, I could totally win this. Then congratulations, Phantom Abyss is the game for you. Massively asynchronous multiplayer game, Phantom Abyss, was developed by, I assume, Team Wibby, and published by Devolver Digital, best known for their quirkier games like Loop Hero, Enter the Gungeon, and Fall Guys. A little bit of the aforementioned Legends of the Hidden Temple, a little bit Indiana Jones. It takes a little bit from both. Your adventurer is trapped in the abyss alongside an ancient god, tasked to acquire a vast number of relics in order to free you both. You wield only your skills and a number of whips that you gradually unlock that offer various benefits, as well as disadvantages that can be blessed away as you acquire said relics, leaving you with your trusty tool and a number of upsides, which makes your early runs more challenging, but subsequent runs much easier. In that sense, it's a very sort of dive into the deep end first sort of game. As you traverse each procedurally generated temple, you can find coins and treasure chests that can be spent on blessings. These blessings are vital to your run, and treasure is often worth the struggle to acquire because a blessing may mean the difference between your run ending early or you obtaining your next relic. Some of these blessings are incredibly useful, and you'll quickly learn that anything that increases your mobility is king in this game. There are blessings that allow you to hover, double jump, and of course, heal damage you've taken, but not all blessings are created equal. As you might guess, hovering and double jumping are two of the best blessings, but they aren't always available to purchase, so some runs can be a bit of a struggle if your luck isn't great. One of the selling points of Phantom Abyss is that if you complete a temple from beginning to end, that's it. That temple is gone forever. You are the only person who's fully completed that temple, and you shall forever remain victorious. How they're able to do this is beyond my humble troglodyte mental capacity, but my educated guess is that a lot of that probably boils down to hundreds of subtly different combinations of the same room. Therefore, if you've got millions of different temples using thousands of different rooms, having a few thousand temples closed off forever is a drop in the bucket. You'll forever have temples for players to conquer, and with each new updated room type added, you're only expanding that number. At any rate, Phantom Abyss looks pretty good, but after about 20 hours of gameplay, I've basically seen it all. While pleasing in its aesthetics, one thing this game needs most desperately is a change of scenery. The only major difference in surroundings comes from when you reach the third tier of a temple, named Inferno, which is essentially just the previous tiers with deadly lava flows instead of peaceful trickling water. I get that moving away from the Aztec theme is impossible since it wouldn't make sense within the lore, but more and different things will ultimately do this game justice. Luckily, it seems that the updates come along pretty quickly and add a lot of new rooms to the game, so there's that at least. The music, on the other hand, is pretty good, but falls into that level of soundtrack where you inevitably turn it off and listen to your own music. A lot of it is very mysterious, but there's some tracks that seem to borrow pretty heavily from the recent Doom games. Not that that's a bad thing, but eventually I just turned off the game music and listened to the Doom soundtrack instead. Use whatever music you like, or preferably whatever makes you feel like a total temple spelunking badass. The ambiance is about what you'd expect from a game of this nature, with drips of water, crumbling rock, the crackle of fiery torches. Even with Doom music in the background, I can still appreciate the sound design, so good work there. As far as criticisms go, there's not a whole lot here that can't be dismissed or ignored. For example, you quickly run into a lot of the same type of rooms after a few hours of play, but there's obviously not infinite room types, and the developers are gradually expanding through updates. Another example is that the temple's guardians range from minor nuisance to absolute run-destroying annoyances, but the point is to force you to keep moving while under duress, so all you can do is learn how to counter their presence when they appear. I wish there were more variety in the guardians, but I suspect we'll probably get one or two more in future updates. There's also some minor amount of confusion when it comes to names. The avatars of other players that you see running the temple with you each game are often referred to in-game as ghosts. However, the game also referred to these ghosts as phantoms. Because there's no consistency there, it can easily fool new players into running whips that allow phantoms to steal coins from chests they open, assuming by phantom they mean the guardians and not the player ghosts. Or at least that was my initial assumption at first, till I quickly realized that wasn't the case. It's nitpicky, but worth noting in case anyone with actual clout watches this video. Speaking of ghosts, each time you run a temple that hasn't been fully completed, each person who's died in that particular temple generates a ghost that the game takes through their pathing up till their inevitable death. In later levels, when there's just a handful of the luckier, more skilled player ghosts, this isn't really an issue, but in the first handful of levels, there's sometimes 20 plus ghosts running, and it's impossible to see through so many of them all running at the same time, the same course as you. Sure, you could always just wait a minute, let them scatter before moving on, but I shouldn't have to wait to play the game. Having options to remove the ghosts and leave their little star trails or to at least considerably increase their transparency would be nice. While we're on the topic of ghosts, having some sort of customization options would be nice. Being able to acquire cosmetics to dress our ghosts for other players would be neat and offer a new progression system, and that includes light trails that player ghosts leave behind. It would be neat to have color trails signifying how far we've gotten in a temple or how many temples we've completed. It would make it much easier to know which ghosts to look at when running a temple so you can at least learn from watching them. As mentioned previously, Phantom Abyss is considered a multiplayer game, but you'll quickly realize that the term multiplayer is an extremely loose one. It's essentially a single-player game with an element that allows you to watch and gauge other players' failed runs in the middle of yours, because they wouldn't be there if they had successfully reached the end of the current temple, and you wouldn't be there either if that was the case. You can allow other players to run your failed temples to gather whips and keys you picked up but dropped upon death, but that's pointless when you can just spend some keys to take the whip back without the need for other players. So it essentially renders that sort of thing absolutely pointless, to the point where I'd rather be able to pick up other players' whips and keys for them mid-run without the need for codes. I feel as though going that route would give me even greater motivation to successfully grab a relic or complete the current temple. While the game gives you pretty much everything you need for success, there are some aspects that increase the challenge. For example, this game has fall damage, and after about 6 or 7 hours of play, you can generally eyeball the difference in a fall between what will make you take damage and what won't. But oftentimes, you'll take fall damage for falls you would never expect to damage you. Similarly, the range on some traps are very deceptive, most specifically the blade traps. Because it's very easy to take damage from them, you have to be very careful to give them a lot of room or else you're going to take damage. When you're in a rush, blade traps are sometimes a death sentence if you misaim your whip or poorly time your jump or slide. In a similar vein, you get very good at eyeballing the maximum distance on your whip's grapple with or without the range blessing. But I don't have enough fingers and toes at this point to count the amount of times the game has failed to grapple, even point blank. It can get very frustrating at times. Beyond those things, Phantom Abyss is extremely fun, and unlocking and blessing new whips is also a lot of fun, and it's a solid progression system that rewards you for good play. Early on, it's pretty easy to bless whips, as you can just acquire the early, easily reached relics to bless them, but unlocking and blessing the better whips requires you to move further and further into the more dangerous tiers of the temple. Eventually, you sort of find those 1 or 2 whips that you really like that lean into your playstyle, and if you're good at the game, there's not much incentive to play with other whips beyond challenging yourself. Phantom Abyss, as of this video's editing, is $25, but has gone down to around $19 during sales. Honestly, it's totally worth the $25 if this sort of game interests you even in the slightest, so it's a steal for anything less than $25. Even at 20 hours, I'm still having fun playing it, and I'll probably get to at least about 30, maybe 40 hours before I shelf it, which is more than I can say for a lot of games with higher price tags that I've picked up over the years. Thanks for hanging out. If you want more Chunky Beef, subscribe to us here on YouTube or check us out on Twitter. Links in the description below. See you soon.